Hello. Oh, I'm small. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, but like this menorah looks like February of 2020, and this one looks like April of 2020. Like I don't know what's happening. I just like could not stop thinking about that. Okay. All right. And I know nobody wants to, but we're actually going to go back to the beginning of March 2020 for a little bit. I was set to get married at the end of the month. I was 20 pounds thinner. I was going to officially convert with the help of Rabbi Zema in a few weeks, and I was making great strides in my career as a teacher. I had just presented a professional development session on executive function skills, and I had convinced my fellow MAPS teachers, music, art, PE, science, to host an open house day in the spring where we would walk parents through what their child was doing when they went to our classes, and hopefully, finally, be seen as a real academic subject. I was a charter school teacher, so I didn't have a guaranteed transparent pay scale. Instead, we were scored on something called the Teacher Career Pathway, where you racked up points based on being observed in the classroom, teacher surveys, student surveys, and for some reason, as an art teacher, state test scores. The mid-year report, though, had just come out, and I was slated to go from step 1 on the ladder, novice, skip step 2, and go straight into step 3, established. Not only does established sound way better than novice, it would mean the difference between no honeymoon and a honeymoon in Europe that summer. So, in short, life was good. Then from one day to the next, it felt like everything came crashing down around me. One day, I was reassuring my friends and family that our wedding would continue as planned, and 10 days prior, I was making frantic phone calls, sobbing to wedding vendors, and postponing our wedding to May, in between trips to the copy machine to create learning packets for over 200 students because we were going to close for 2 weeks. The week after felt like a blur. A mom apologized to me for not having set anything up because she had been out all day trying to secure basic staples for her family. I showed one of my third graders how to set up all her accounts because she was home alone and her mom was an essential worker. I spent hours on the phone with Spanish-speaking parents trying to guide them through what was coming next, even though I wasn't really sure myself. One mom I spoke to didn't know how to open a web browser, and now we were expecting her to help her kids through remote learning. After an hour trying to set up Zoom with no success, we cried together at the unfairness of it all. I was supposed to get married March 27. The forecast had been predicting rain that entire weekend. I woke up that morning to 65-degree weather and not a single cloud in the sky. I was furious. The least the world could do for me is have weather to match up to how I was feeling, and instead it was taunting me with how beautiful my day would have been. I had been creating video lessons and saved all my editing for that day so that I could sob through the workday. A few days later, we postponed to August and eventually to November. From there, the losses just kept pouring in. I said at one point, I feel like this is taking everything from me. The 2-week school closure became indefinite. We had no return date. The open house naturally was canceled. I spent hours making engaging videos that no one seemed to be watching. A handful were still working hard, but they would have worked hard anyway. Art was always going to be a part of their lives no matter what I did. But most were turning in work that I knew was far below what they could do, if they were even turning any work at all. Art was on the bottom of the academic priority list, and I felt it now more than ever. The Teacher Career Pathway evaluation system had been frozen, and it was announced that we would all be returning in the fall with our same ranks and the same salary, with no set date for when it would be reinstated. All my progress in my career and in the art department didn't just feel frozen, it felt decimated. While the executive director's children were learning from their summer home in Nantucket, most of my students were in cramped apartments and didn't leave their home for days at a time. And I was one of them. I was in a 1-bedroom with my husband. I went months without seeing my family. I was angry, tired, and scared. I'm not going to lie, I did a lot of moping around for a bit there, but then eventually I decided it was time to come up with a plan. I had been trying so hard to work my way up this ladder, but was I even happy at this school? I thought back to my experiences and realized I was so busy chugging along, I had never stopped to think if I was happy where I was, and the truth was, I wasn't. I was overworked, unsupported, and unfulfilled. I called up the principal and asked if I could count on her for her reference because I was leaving. My friends thought I was crazy. They told me this was not the right time to start over, but I disagreed. This was the perfect time to start over. When else would you start over other than when everything had fallen apart? So I knew I hated remote teaching, and I knew I would hate it even more when winter came. So I started looking for schools that I felt could get full-time in-person learning done. I also realized how rewarding it felt to connect with families who needed someone who could speak to them in their language. And so I wanted a part in creating more bilingual people in this world. Did you know that about 50% of the world's population is bilingual, but that number drops to 20% when you're looking just at the US? I want to change that. I made a list of everything I needed my next school to have and went searching until I found it. Finally, I landed upon Avenues, where I took a maternity leave position in a second grade Spanish immersion pod at the risk of becoming unemployed when January hit. Once again, my friends thought I was crazy. There was so much insecurity already, and I was adding to it. But my husband saw my unhappiness and convinced me that this was a risk we couldn't afford not to take. So there, in a pod of 14 students, I would start over. There were some adjustments. The pods were taken very seriously at this school, which meant students only left the classroom for a movement period, and we had to stay with them for it because their PE teachers could not intervene if a student needed a Band-Aid or a shoelace tied. No one outside of the pod was allowed in the classroom, not even the principal. Lunch was delivered to the classroom, and we all ate there. Teachers could not meet in person with another teacher. Between the hour, and guys, I am an extrovert, okay? Like, I will talk to a wall, so this was rough. Between the hours spent in the classroom, my commute, I was masked for approximately 10 hours a day, with breaks for snack and lunch that made the whole initiative seem fruitless, like COVID just disappeared for those 30 minutes we were all unmasked eating lunch. I don't know. We had clear panels on every table that added to the difficulty in seeing everyone and hearing everyone in the class. We had staggered arrivals and dismissal, and sometimes the whole thing felt a little lonely. We had weekly COVID tests that we had to hand in, and if we forgot our test at home that day, we would have to pay $35 for a rapid. And I do not want to tell you how many times I forgot mine. And we also lamented the death of snow days as we had come to know them. Still, I resolved to see this new period with gratitude and excitement for the opportunity. Yes, we would be confined to these four walls for most of the day, but that meant we could all grow so close. And we did. After having 200 plus students whose names I had trouble keeping track of, getting to know these 14 kiddos inside and out was a gift. For the first time, I could consider their needs and make adjustments necessary to meet them where they were at. One of my students went home consistently telling her parents she had the best day of her life. Even my second graders seemed to understand that what we were doing was really special. Behind the masks, there was laughter, air hugs, learning, a community, a pocket on this planet where we had a shred of normalcy. When I was offered to stay on through the end of the year, I said yes with no hesitation. On the last day of school, we cried. Despite how impossible it had seemed at times, we had a wonderful school year and we didn't want it to end. This summer, I was offered a leadership position in the summer program. We made vaccines mandatory for all summer staff, which meant that naturally we lost some staff. When we announced everyone could take their masks off for outdoor play, we rejoiced. Things were moving along. The finish line was in sight. Now, I'm not so sure. And it's hard not to be angry. But there is one thing I know. I rebuilt once, and I can do it again. My friend sent me an article recently about the COVID learning slide. It was about how reading and math scores had tumbled last year. First of all, duh. Second of all, I was confused by what my reaction was supposed to be. Sad? Urgent? Because honestly, the only thing I could think to say was, so? So what? Why are we, after a year that turned our lives upside down, still caring about some arbitrary benchmark set by people who have never met our children? Who are they to decide what constitutes success? Maybe your child started gardening with you, and now they're considering a career in botany. Maybe they got into cartography, and they can rival Google Maps with their ability to give you directions. Maybe they sat on their butt playing Rocket League and Among Us day in and day out, and you let them because that's what you needed to do to survive this miserable time in one piece. All of those are okay in my gradebook. I'm also hearing a lot of conversations on what's best for our children moving forward. Some parents are demanding we start in person as close to normal as possible because remote learning didn't work. Others are demanding we continue with the remote option because it's what's safest for all our children. All I can say is, forget the kids. We adults didn't learn anything if we are still walking around insisting there is one right way to do education. There will never be a one-size-fits-all solution because we do not have one-size-fits-all children. The emphasis should be on serving individual children, meeting them where they're at, and ensuring, above all else, that we are taking care of their emotional well-being and shaping these children to be empathetic, innovative, accepting human beings committed to looking out for each other in the future so they don't have to have this conversation again in a few decades. As we head into the high holidays, well, we're here now, I am reminded of how frail humanity can be, how quickly we can be brought down, and how we are riddled with flaws. At the same time, I'm reminded that we can forgive those we feel have acted against the best interests of our community. Forgive ourselves for the transgressions we made when we were feeling hopeless and scared, and commit to creating a better year using the lessons we learned from the last one. We are allowed to start over from scratch. I'm Jewish now. It was made official a week before our wedding in November, which, yes, with great sacrifice, we were able to get married. And if there's one thing I learned during this process, is that if there's one thing Jewish people are good at, it's overcoming difficult circumstances and peppering the journey with Jewish humor, leaving plenty of room for kvetching along the way. Thank you.
Wow, what hard acts to follow. So I'm going to do a